So one day I was scouring YouTube and stumbled upon the Spider-Man No Way Home trailer. First, I was hyped to go see it when it comes out, and second, I really wanted to recreate the shot where Spider-Man is falling through the sky and the city warps and opens up. I thought to myself, I could do that. Little did I know what I was getting myself into. If you haven't watched the original video, there will be a link in the description below. One of the first things I did was to do a test to see if I could create and render out a decent looking cityscape. I knew that was going to be the hardest part of this project and figuring out how to warp it like in the trailer. I tried different methods like manually creating buildings, but that was taking a long time. I was trying to extract cities from Google Maps, but there was baked in lighting in the textures. And I ended up using Scene City, a city generator add-on for Blender. And this cut down a lot of time to create the city. And with this add-on, I was able to create a good looking city relatively easily. But it wasn't long until I realized that once I had to expand the city to be much larger, that Blender was barely able to keep up and handle this large scene. Plus, I haven't even started figuring out how I'm going to make the city terrain warp and bend. It got to the point where I thought there was no way I can finish this project. I had moments of just giving up, but I was determined to figure out a solution. I turned my attention away from creating the city for the time being and planned to come back to it later with a fresh mind. I wanted to start filming and lay out a previs of the entire project to get the pacing right and to figure out any other issues before they arise. I really didn't want to render out or do more VFX than what was needed, so the previs would really help with that. I started filming the shots I know I was going to need. For the first shot, I set up the practical lamp on the desk and lowered the intensity by adding some paper inside the lampshade. I set up an LED panel with a warmer color temperature to hit my face off to frame left. For the blue streaks of light, I set up my Godox LED light and pointed it at a mirror with strips of electrical tape across it. The first and last shot were the same setup and filmed back to back. For the shot of me free falling through the sky, I was standing up against a green screen with the box fan pointed at me and turned on. For the shot of the bed sheets flapping in the wind, I laid the bed sheet on the floor with one end taped to the end of a box fan turned on. I lit the scene with a single Godox LED light right above. With the live action shots filmed, I went ahead and created a previs edit with the shot footage and text overlay for the VFX. This helped a lot with deciding what VFX shots I wanted and to lock down a rough edit. One other asset that I needed other than the city was a digital double of myself, so I worked on that. I started with using a piece of software called MakeHuman to create the base mesh of myself that I'll be replacing the textures and the head model later on. To recreate a digital version of my head, I used Avatar SDK and uploaded a photo of my face. This creates a 3D model of my head that I can import into Blender. With all the 3D pieces made, I put them all together in Blender and textured everything by taking pictures of the clothes that I was going to wear for the day of filming. Then it was time to rig everything, which I used AutoRig Pro to speed up the process. And then I finally had my digital double all set. Now it was time to tackle the first VFX shot and the issue of creating the large city landscape, animating my digital double falling through the sky, and also creating a cloth simulation for the bedsheet. I first started with bringing in my digital double and creating a free-falling animation. Once that was done, I created a camera move that followed the free-fall animation. The camera move would reveal the city as it turns around. For the cloth simulation, I used Houdini's Vellum Solver. In order to create the large city scene, I had to do everything I could to keep the amount of objects in the viewport to a minimum, which meant organizing everything in collections and making sure only what I needed was visible. Even then, Blender was still slow to work with, but just barely manageable. With one patch of the city created, I made duplicated instances and moved them around until I covered most of the area that the camera reveals. I planned to have the city farther out into the horizon be covered by clouds. I did this by creating a new scene with the same camera movement and using Eevee combined with a cloud shader material. For the second VFX shot, I took a square plane and used shape keys to make the ground look like it's collapsing. I then created the roads and used a shrink wrap modifier. Now for the actual buildings, I had to first create a plane underneath the building. Then I selected the building and the plane, go into edit mode, select 3 vertices, hit Ctrl P, and click Make Vertex Parent. Then I applied a shrink wrap modifier to the plane with the ground as the target. And using these settings, the building will follow the deformation of the ground. I repeated this process for every building until everything was filled. I took the city that was generated from Scene City, deleted the middle portion, and filled it with the collapsing buildings. For the VFX shot of the ground hole opening, I also used shape keys. A plane was placed underneath with a white emission shader. I used a displacement texture to fake the look of buildings. Something to note which I stumbled upon while working on this project is that turning off show overlays and being in render view was more responsive and faster than being in the viewport. It seems counterintuitive, but it works. Before finally rendering out everything and starting compositing, I did viewport renders of all the shots so I can update the previous edit. So I replaced all the text placeholders with the new renders, and it was a great feeling to see that things were working out and that I was one step closer to finishing everything. Here's how the updated previews looked like. Now it was time to composite everything in After Effects. For the first VFX shot, I basically had renders of the sky, city, clouds, and digital double with the cloth. I tried out SuperComp to blend everything together. I added in a lens flare and then finally added Real Smart Motion Blur on an adjustment layer. For this shot, I had 2 renders of the foreground and background. I used an adjustment layer to do some basic color correction. I then added fog to the background layer. This was done by rendering out a mist pass from Blender and setting the blending mode to add. I added a lens flare, a vignette, and some lights to the foreground buildings to make the city feel more alive. For the free falling shot with the green screen, I used key light to remove the green. I added this sky that I keyframed to move up slightly to give a sense of parallax and depth. Then I added in these animated clouds to give a sense of speed. The final VFX shot was pretty simple with just 2 renders of the city, with the ground opening up and the digital double falling past the camera. I also added Real Smart Motion Blur. Finally, in DaVinci Resolve, I brought everything together to color correct and grade the shots. I added in some additional digital push-ins and camera shake to some of the shots. I added in sound effects and some epic music and called it done. This project really pushed the limits of what Blender can handle, and it was really important that I had the scene organized. Even with that, Blender was running really slow. Luckily, the previs helped with spotting any issues, since there was times the viewport just slowed to a crawl. Other than that, I'm glad I didn't give up on this project, even though it felt impossible to finish at times. So with that, leave a comment or question about this project if you'd like. Subscribe to help out and support me. And until then, take care, and I'll see you in the next video.